All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Workbench, your resource rich weekly podcast and newsletter. As always, the Workbench is brought to you by Lead Truffle, the #1 AI speed to lead system for home services. Today, very excited to be joined by Nick Zemanek. He is the owner of Pink's Windows Pittsburgh. Started that about 7 months ago here in March 2025. Prior to that, super interesting, but not totally uncommon. Had a career in tech specifically, and we've talked to many people on this pod, Nick, who've were in some more traditional 9 to 5 industry, tech, finance, something like that, and left those industries for potentially greener pastures. Maybe not as green once you're in them, but we'll see what your opinion is on that. So yeah, really excited to dive into Nick's story, joining a franchise, moving from tech into the home services world. So Nick, thank you so much for coming on. Before we dive into the shop talk, would love to hear, how you're doing and how your week's going so far.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, week's going well. I've gotten to a point where I do have some general managers running the day to day for the most part of Pinks, and they were in training last week. Um, and so I ran the ship, and now I'm back, kind of stepping back a little bit, and getting a little bit more space to work on some other things, which is
Yeah.
which is cool.
Love it, man. So tell those, me too, and those listening, what was your career prior to 7 months ago becoming a professional window washer?
Yeah, yeah.
And I
So
know you're a businessman and a business owner, so that's a little trite there, but I
yeah.
like to frame it up as such. So yeah, tell us how you got to, from a career in tech to what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, I'm a window washer at heart these days. Yeah, so, spent about 12 years or so in the corporate world,
Mm,
went to get the bachelor's, my undergrad is in industrial engineering, went to get my master's degree in engineering and, stepped in, in management consulting, started off in Deloitte, worked there a couple years, hopped around a bunch of different corporate jobs. Never was all that satisfied, probably not too uncommon for some other people you talk to. And about a year ago, I was really, really looking for what's next. I think, one of the motivations, I'm a 1 and a 3-year-old, and on one side, it's like, man, I don't want to go start my own business because life is super hectic. But the other point, it's like, well, it's always going to be hectic, for the rest, and I need to kind of show them, what like working hard and doing your own thing and taking life by the horns really looks like. So previously, I was at Meta. I was there for a couple of years. Most recently on a contract, but I was working on uh, basically running software programs for developing realistic avatars for the metaverse, so augmented reality and virtual reality. These are avatars that look like literally exactly like you, exact replicas, in augmented and virtual reality. So pretty much the opposite end of the spectrum of like in real life business. So yeah, I was really looking hard and, started, we can go into this, like, my search there and what I was thinking, but just wanted to do something to call my own. I thought going in the franchise route was a nice middle ground between like starting from scratch versus buying a business, which was another thing I was looking at. And yeah, just went for it. And got to where I am now. So, full 180 from the tech behind the computer, the laptop, to literally knocking out, we don't do much door knocking, but going into businesses and trying to sell window cleaning to them in person, in face, and running a team of folks who are doing the actual window washing as well. So, pretty 180 to like a more, personable in real life job versus kind of the metaverse that I was living in before.
yeah, yeah, and I'm speaking, I'm preaching to the choir here because I worked at TikTok, I worked at startups, I worked at bigger, more established companies with a comfortable salary, and I left that behind to do my own thing. I think question for you, Nick, someone listening, Deloitte, Meta, good salary, I'm going to assume, strong benefits, you got a family relying on you. What was your mindset around, giving up that golden goose, so to speak, to go, put a lot of risk on the line, and risk a lot with, franchising is not zero risk by any means. Starting your own business is definitely not zero risk. What was your mindset around, leaving that behind and going on the more challenging but potentially rewarding path?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. It's risky, right? It's scary. I'm super fortunate that I did have those jobs where I did have nice salaries, so I do have a runway, right? So that's one way to mitigate it. And to be honest, yeah, I did this 7 months ago, but I had kind of been planning for this for years to do
Mm,
something to call my
mm-hmm,
own.
mm-hmm.
Living below our means, I would say, and kind of saving for it and kind of always planning to do something. Like I knew that was in the future for me. Y- You know, Probably 5 years or so, I've been kind of looking at what is
Right.
next and knowing that I need to prepare for that.
Okay, so let's talk about the search versus franchising. I know the ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition community, the searchers. I'm vaguely familiar with it just from Lead Truffle and my software company and talking to folks in that world and the podcast too, for that matter. What was your search like? How deep did you go? What industries were you looking at? And just talk us through that journey before then eventually landing on Pinks. What exactly were you looking for during that period?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I started really looking at businesses, probably more like tech agency focused, just because that was what I was more comfortable with. I was in consulting and I did have that background. Um, and also some, I have some manufacturing experience, so kind of like trying to mix that. I think ultimately what was for me the issue with the ETA route is I have a house, I have kids, I have a wife, like
Shout out.
taking a $1 million, yeah, awesome. Taking that big loan, signing that personal guarantee, I just wasn't comfortable with it. I remember talking to my wife about it. I was really like gung ho because like the numbers make sense, right? It's like, oh, take out the loan and you have this much revenue and you pay back, this much, loan payments every month or year. It's like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. But you're still kind of, tied to that loan. And I remember talking to my wife about it. And for me, this is all about like freedom, right? And she's like, it doesn't really sound like you're that free if you like have $1 million, $2 million loan that you have to pay back, especially if the business goes sideways. I remember having that conversation. I was kind of like, yeah, I guess you're right. So and then on the startup side, um, first business, I wanted to kind of accelerate that learning process of running a business, and that's where I kind of landed on the franchise route, kind of in the middle, right? You're not starting from scratch. You kind of have a playbook, but you're not taking out that huge loan that, you have to have a personal guarantee on. And, I'll be honest, like I didn't look at a ton of franchises. I learned a little bit, but Pink's specifically had caught my eye literally probably a year or two ago when I first heard them on a podcast. Um, just thought like such an awesome combination of brand versus like operations. Um, and started just going down the route and couldn't find a reason not to do it. And here I am. Um, yeah, that was kind of my logic there. There was a nice middle ground between those two spectrums of the business of the new business route.
What yeah, and so in terms of business type, what specifically about the Pink's model caught your eye? And window washing in particular, was there, I don't think it's terribly high ticket. You could correct me if I'm wrong. What about window washing as a business model really pushed you to make the leap?
Yeah, a huge part of it is the recurring
Yeah,
side.
true. Yeah.
I mean, we're 7 months in. We launched in at the end of March, basically April, and now we're almost in November, and we're have those recurring houses that we did in March and April and May going back in November, and like our November schedule is like it looks great, right? Because it's like, oh my, this is like the business, right? This is the business that you want to be in, is the recurring side. So one really big piece is recurring.
Hmm.
Two, like where I live, like there just isn't really that much competition, I would say. Like I couldn't name another window washer. I barely even knew when I started going down this route that other people got their windows washed because you just don't see them around. There was like one or two other, window washers that I even looked familiar for me around here. And then just like the service, the home service side of it, you know, people need their windows washed. When it comes down to it, like I just really wanted something simple, like a value proposition that was simple, and the business that was simple, right? It's, you know, hey, we offer cleaning services. You have windows, you probably need it. And we clean your windows. Like it's not like this like huge sales cycle that you have to work through. And yeah, I will say on like the lower ticket side for sure, like, our average job is like, $400 or $500 for an invoice. We have bigger jobs and we're still getting into commercials. That should be going up. But where that kicks in is again that recurring side. So if you do that house twice a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, and then you do that again next year and the year after, then that ticket looks a lot better. So that was really like the whole kind of combination that I was looking for.
What was that first month like, man, going from in office behind a computer screen, like so many of us, myself included, to man, I'm walking in this person's home to clean their windows and their dog's barking at me and what like that I just that juxtaposition I'd imagine was crazy. What was that first month, 2 months like for you on the job?
Yeah, for sure. So many thoughts here. Like first off, like Pink's, we have the uniform. And I've always thought of it as like it's kind of like your costume to like be this other person, right? So like after that first, you know, two businesses I went into and just like total, get just total no's, like they don't want anything to do with you. After that, it's just like game on. Like you just the like the disappointment isn't gonna hit you anymore. Um so and you know, I would say it was so crazy. It gets so crazy as a business owner. Um, that's one new respect I have. I was talking to another business owner, like a OG in our neighborhood, owned some restaurants, and he was telling me, it's like, yeah, people who don't have kids like just will not understand really what it's like when you don't have kids. He's like, there's only one other thing like that, and it's if you don't have a business, if you don't own a business, like you'll never understand what it's like to own a business. So that really hit home for me. Just the responsibility kind of of everything. Um, it was hard to like even reflect on, the difference between being in front of people and being behind a laptop. I would say it felt like healthier, if that makes sense. Just like being in front of people and talking to them. So that's one piece, and then I think immediately it went to the team. Like the success of Pink's Windows Pittsburgh is going to be really based on our team at from day one and throughout. And we could talk a lot more about that because it's been uh such a huge factor in the success of our company. So really just like making sure that that team knows what they're doing, um, making sure they're supported, and just understanding that they are the engine that makes this thing go, as opposed to where there's not as much camaraderie, I would say, like in the corporate. Yeah, so that was the difference there.
Yeah, what let's get dive into that. What has been building the team look like? What do you look for? What have been the successes and failures of building your team in the 7 months? Would love to hear all about that piece.
Yeah, so that literally from the first week, I I hired two great guys. So I didn't have to basically babysit jobs and I could focus on growing the company. Um, the first person I hired, I hung up a bunch of flyers at local coffee shops before we launched, and his wife saw it. She dug the uniform, said he should apply, and he's now one of my GMs. And then the second guy I hired, they started with me. He's our one of our team leads, super reliable, dependable, like a huge piece of this puzzle. Third guy I hired, like 1 week later, he's our other GM. So the first three people I hired, um, that has been key in that they have taken on one bigger roles in the company, but just like awesome people who represent, the brand. in the company. Um, so up front, I invested a lot, right? Hanging up flyers in coffee shops and just telling as many people as possible. I think after that, more like Indeed work and, just really, really going through resumes and phone interviews. You know, we scaled up to 3 vans. So right now I have 8 people working for me. We were starting in August, we were up to 8 people. And so I'd hire, let's say 6 people in like 30 or 45 days. So, have some horror stories, just like folks not showing up the first day and kind of, folks leaving um, with with a pretty short, uh, day's notice. But like right now, our team is awesome. Really, really stepping up and, just like, showing off what the Pinks brand is all about and getting reviews and really bought in. But getting to that third van, like it honestly took me like 90 days or so to like get the team in shape with like some people leaving, getting the team up to speed. Like that was the biggest challenge we had so far was like getting to that third van. It was just a lot of hiring and training and finding the right people, and bringing people on. So spring, we're already looking ahead to spring. We're gonna need to bring more people on. Like, what can we do now? With boots on the ground, getting into restaurants, getting into coffee shops. Because that's the other thing I'll mention. We're not hiring typical blue collar people. We're actually hiring service industry people. So those guys I just talked about, they're all ex-baristas. They're all come from the coffee industry, and now they're GMs and team leads, and so we're hiring for customer service, and then we're teaching them to window clean, which I think is pretty unique to Pinks, I would say. So that's been really successful for us because even if we do have like callbacks or something doesn't turn out well, almost every time a customer calls saying, "Hey, so and so, they were awesome. They were great. I love the team, but they did miss a window. Like, I think someone can come back and fix it." So that has made things like a lot easier that we have that customer service base to create that rapport with the customer, and then teaching them the skills we're just going to constantly get better at.
How steep is the learning curve on the actual work, the window washing process?
I would say we're learning, we're tinkering with training, but I would say it's about a month before someone is, let's just call it, up to speed. They're not necessarily going to be flying through windows and be super efficient, but like they can go and independently, do like pieces of the job by themselves and be, productive and effective at it.
This kind of leads me into a question about the franchisee franchisor relationship and whatever you can disclose there. I'm curious more generally how that's been for you, from the playbook, the branding. Are they giving you leads? Are they helping you hire? Like how has that been for you in the first 7 months? And then I guess more specifically, how much does the franchisor provide you with the resources to get that person up to speed? Are they giving you videos and booklets for these folks to read? I'm a little uneducated on the inner workings of that piece. So yeah, just curious your thoughts on that overall franchisor franchisee relationship and what it's meant for your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. With Resi and Pinks, they're super devoted to, I think, having the best for each of the franchisees and having them grow. Um, you know, so I would say it's more of like we get a playbook, right? This is kind of the things you do, one to set up your business and grow and launch. And then, there's certain pieces of it that we know work. So, that comes out of just like on my revenue and for instance, our marketing, right? We use a third party marketing agency. I didn't have to vet that marketing agency. They work with all the Pink's locations. They know the content. They know, you know, they're good at this, right? Like, yeah, sure, I still pay them, but that was like an instance of where like, hey, here's a playbook, right? You just gotta do it. Um, training, training and like launching the business and kind of like the playbook to run the business is there's definitely tons of resources for that. We have an online training portal and then in-person training and some different training aspects. Um, I would say, one thing with service industries and maybe service industry franchises, the reality is, yeah, we have a training portal for how to clean windows, but you got to go clean some windows to learn how to do that, right? So that's why, it does take a month for folks to get up to speed, and that's on us. We don't have like some training that we can send them to for the window cleaning. We do have some GM training that we can send them to. That and then again, there's like playbooks, right, for hiring, right? Hey, this is what you do, kind of, guidance and training on it. But you have to go do the hiring, right? You're going to do the interviews, you're posting the jobs, you're filtering through the people. So like again, I think of it as like there's a playbook, but it's really up to the franchisee to execute on it. And so I come back to that my logic between buying a business versus starting a business, that kind of franchise in the middle. I think the reality probably was it wasn't any less work to start a franchise than it was to start a business. But I think it did accelerate how fast we grew. Because again, it was 5 months in, I was already able to hire a GM to run the day to day because we were up to 3 vans doing that type of revenue. If I would have went and started my own window cleaning company, it definitely would have taken much, much longer to do that. Um, so yeah.
Makes sense. I think that's a great way to frame it too. Like it's still you're starting a business for sure, but that each hour of work you're putting in is probably much more productive and you're getting more out of that hour when you're starting with a franchise versus going completely from zero to.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, one other example I'll put in there I kind of like to use is all of the things that go in the van, right? A van list of here's the squeegees
Mm-hmm.
and the pressure washer, all that. We were given that, right? Yeah, it would have taken us months and
Yeah.
months to figure out everything we need to go in the van with lots of Home Depot trips and Amazon, overnight things,
Yeah.
right? So like just things like that, like those are like the
Yeah. It takes a
acceleration
lot of
kind
the
of things.
trial and error out of it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Nick, super interesting, man. Anything we didn't cover here that you wanted to get to today?
I don't think so. I think, kind of just harping on my last point, like reflecting on the past 6 to 7 months and, how far we've come. Like it's been really hard. It's been hard work. Like when I compare it to, the comfort of a corporate job and kind of you're there 8 hours a day and you kind of go home. Like there was super tough times, especially in the beginning, trying to, we were super fortunate that we got just lots of demand very quickly, which I can't complain about. But it also, we scaled really quickly and that was really hard. So finding people and running the business and, this is the most challenging thing I've done. But, at the end of the day, I'm really happy I did it. I think for me, my goal with Pinks was to have this be like a foundational experience that I can then potentially start other businesses. What Pinks was like a education for me to like basically learn how to run a business and launch a business. And now I'm kind of looking at more other projects, even some more in the tech space, because I know how to do that, right? I think if we can run like this in-person business, then I think the businesses like approach moving forward. Um, I have the confidence now that I can do those as well.
Window cleaning CRM coming at you 2026.
Yeah, maybe. There's the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Nick, thank you, man, for coming on. For folks that want to connect with Pink's Windows Pittsburgh or just with you personally, where can folks find you or your business on the web?
Yeah, so pinkswindows.com/Pittsburgh, especially if anyone's looking for a window cleaning quote in the Pittsburgh area. And then just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Hit me up and just Nick Zemanek, at LinkedIn. You can find me.
Nick, appreciate you coming on, man. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.